The footman's white glove reached past Clara's shoulder and lifted her plate while her fork was still in her hand. Half a slice of roast pheasant, 3 small potatoes, gone. For one moment, Clara sat perfectly still, her fork hovering over empty white linen, and she felt 11 pairs of eyes decide, all at once, not to look at her. "Discipline," her grandmother announced to the table, her voice as smooth as the silver candlesticks, "is what separates ladies from strays." Somebody coughed politely. Somebody else reached for the wine. Down the long table, laughter started again, careful and thin, the way laughter sounds when everyone has agreed to pretend nothing happened. Clara lowered her fork. She folded her hands in her lap. She had learned in 7 years at Harrington Hall that hunger was quieter when you sat very still. And then she heard it. The soft scrape of china sliding across linen. A plate, a full plate, untouched, still warm, the smell of roasted pheasant rising from it like a small miracle, came to a stop directly in front of her. Clara looked up. The Duke of Ashworth was not looking at her. He was looking down the table at her grandmother, and though his voice was calm, it carried to every corner of the dining room. "Then I must be astray as well, Lady Harrington," he said, "because I find I have no appetite for discipline tonight." The silence that followed was not polite. It was the silence of a room where something had cracked. Clara had not even wanted to come down to dinner. That morning, her grandmother had made the rules very clear. You will wear the gray dress. You will speak only when spoken to. You will remember that this dinner is for Diana. Everything at Harrington Hall was for Diana. Diana, with her golden curls and her new gowns from London. Diana, who was 19 and beautiful, and as their grandmother liked to say, the future of this family. Tonight the Duke of Ashworth himself had come to dine, young, unmarried, and richer than anyone in 3 counties, and the whole house had spent a week polishing itself for him. Clara was 22, and she was not the future of anything. She was the orphan, the charity case, the granddaughter who was fed and housed out of * Christian kindness, as Lady Harrington reminded every guest who asked, and she made sure they asked. So Clara had worn the gray dress. She had taken the chair at the far end of the table, half hidden behind a vase of lilies. She had kept her eyes down and eaten slowly, the way she always did, because slow eating made a small portion feel bigger. Too slowly, apparently. Lady Harrington's signal to the footman had been a single lifted finger. Clara knew that finger well. It had taken away her plate 100 times before for chewing too slowly, for sitting incorrectly, for looking sullen. But it had never done it in front of a duke. That was the strange part, Clara thought, staring at the full plate now steaming in front of her. Her grandmother never made mistakes in front of important people. Never. Unless it wasn't a mistake. Unless her grandmother had wanted the Duke to see it. "Your Grace," Lady Harrington's smile did not move, but something behind her eyes did. "You are too generous. My granddaughter's habits are a private family matter. I would not have them spoil your dinner." "Nothing is spoiled," the Duke said pleasantly, "except perhaps the pheasant if the young lady lets it go cold." He turned to Clara then. For the first time, he looked directly at her. He was younger than she had expected, 30, perhaps, with dark hair and the kind of steady gray eyes that seemed to weigh everything they touched. Everyone had spent the week talking about his fortune. No one had mentioned his eyes. "Please," he said quietly, "eat." Clara's hands were trembling. She was aware of Diana, 3 seats away, staring at her with an expression that was no longer sisterly. She was aware of her grandmother, at the head of the table, holding her smile the way a soldier holds a sword. She picked up her fork, she ate. The pheasant was the best thing she had tasted in 7 years, and she hated that her eyes burned while she ate it. Conversation limped back to life around the table. The vicar's wife praised the lilies. Diana, recovering quickly, leaned toward the Duke with her prettiest laugh, and asked whether it was true that Ashworth Park had 200 rooms. 206, the Duke said, most of them empty. How sad, Diana breathed, for a house to be so empty. Yes, he said, but when he said it, he was not looking at Diana. He was looking down the table, past the lilies, at the girl in the gray dress. Clara dropped her gaze to her plate and told herself it meant nothing. Men like him did not look at women like her, not in that way. He had felt sorry for her, that was all. Tomorrow he would forget her name, if he had ever known it. She was wrong about that. He knew her name very well. Dinner ended. The ladies withdrew. Clara was sent upstairs before the tea was poured. You have had a long day, her grandmother said, which meant you have been seen enough. But Clara did not go straight to her small room at the end of the corridor. She stopped on the landing in the dark, because the front doors were open below and the Duke's carriage had come around, and she wanted, foolishly, childishly, to see him one more time. He stood in the lamplight, pulling on his gloves. His footman held the carriage door. And then the Duke said something that Clara would turn over in her mind all night, something quiet, meant for the footman alone. But the entrance hall was made of stone, and stone carries voices upward. Send word to London tonight, the Duke said. Tell them I have found her. The footman glanced up at the great house. And your Grace, is it as they said? The Duke was silent for a moment. When he answered, his voice had gone hard. No, he said, it is worse. That girl is in far more danger than we were told. He climbed into the carriage. The door closed. The horses pulled away into the dark. And Clara stood frozen on the landing, her heart pounding against her ribs, 3 words repeating over and over in her mind. I have found her. The Duke of Ashworth had not come to Harrington Hall for Diana. He had come for her asterisk. Clara did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed at the end of the corridor, the room that had once belonged to a lady's maid, and stared at the ceiling while the Duke's words circled in her head like birds that would not land. I have found her. She is in far more danger than we were told. By morning she had almost convinced herself she had misheard. Stone halls play tricks. Tired minds play worse ones. Perhaps he had said something else entirely. Perhaps he had been speaking of someone else. Because the alternative made no sense. Nobody looked for Clara. Nobody had looked for her in 7 years, not since the winter her father died and she had arrived at Harrington Hall with 1 trunk, 1 doll, and a black ribbon in her hair. She had been 15 then, old enough to remember a different life, old enough to remember a father who had laughed loudly and let her read at the breakfast table, and a house by the sea where nobody measured her portions. Old enough to remember her grandmother's very first words to her, spoken in the great cold entrance hall while the servants carried her trunk upstairs. In this house, child, we have rules. You will find that everything goes gently for those who follow them. Clara had followed them, all of them, and nothing had ever gone gently. The rules of Harrington Hall were never written down, but Clara could have recited them like a catechism. Breakfast was served at 8. Clara's breakfast was served at 1/2 whatever remained. Tea and toast most days, on good days an egg. New gowns came twice a year for Diana. Clara received Diana's old ones, taken in at the waist and let down at the hem, always 1 season out of fashion, always in colors that had suited Diana and made Clara look like a shadow. When guests came, Clara was introduced last, if at all. My late son's daughter, Lady Harrington, would say, with a small sigh that invited sympathy for herself. We took her in, of course. What else could one do? And the visitors would murmur how good she was, how charitable, and Lady Harrington would accept their admiration the way she accepted everything, as no more than her due. But here was the strange thing. The thing Clara turned over and over in her mind as she grew older, the thing that made no sense no matter how she looked at it. Her grandmother would not let her go. 3 years ago, the vicar's wife had offered to find Clara a position as a governess in Bath. A good family, kind people, a real wage. Clara had dared to hope for a week. Then Lady Harrington had refused coldly, absolutely, without one word of explanation. Last spring, a widowed cousin in Yorkshire had written, asking if Clara might come and be her companion. The letter had been answered within a day. The answer had been no. Clara was not wanted at Harrington Hall. That was made plain to her every morning of her life. And yet she was kept like something locked in a drawer, unloved and unused, but never, ever given away. Why? She had asked only once. 2 years ago, standing in her grandmother's study, she had gathered her courage and said, "Grandmother, I could earn my own bread. I could stop being a burden to you. Why won't you let me go?" Lady Harrington had looked at her for a long, long moment. And then she had smiled, a real smile, which was somehow worse than the false ones, and said, "Because charity, my dear, begins at home." That night, Clara's supper had not come up at all. She had never asked again. The morning after the Duke's dinner, the house woke in a foul temper. Clara heard it before she saw it. Doors closing too hard, a maid crying in the back stairwell, Diana's raised voice behind the morning room door. She caught only pieces, humiliated me in front of him, that little gray mouse. "You promised me, grandmother, you promised." And then her grandmother's voice, low and cold, the voice that ended all arguments. "He will come back. Men always come back to look at a pretty thing, and when he does, she will not be at that table. Now stop crying. Your face swells when you cry." Clara stepped away from the door and went down the servants' stairs, her heart drumming. She will not be at that table. So that was to be her punishment for the Duke's kindness. She would simply be erased. It was almost funny, she thought. He had given her a plate, and it would cost her a place at the table. In the kitchen, the cook pretended not to see her, the safest thing to do on days like this. But old Mrs. Pott did not pretend. Mrs. Pott had been housekeeper at Harrington Hall for 40 years. She was small and round and gray, and she was the only person in the house who ever said Clara's name as though it were simply a name, and not an apology. Now she pressed a warm bundle into Clara's hands, bread, cheese, a slice of cold pie wrapped in a cloth, and glanced at the door. "Eat it upstairs, quick, before anyone." "Mrs. Pott," Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Last night the Duke of Ashworth said something as he was leaving. He said he had found me as though someone had been searching." She watched the old woman's face. "Why would anyone search for me?" The change was instant. Mrs. Pott went white, truly white, the color of cold ash, and her hands closed hard around Clara's wrists. "You heard wrong," she whispered. "I did not." "Then forget it. Forget it, child, for the love of heaven." The old woman's eyes darted to the door, to the window, as though the walls themselves reported to Lady Harrington. And perhaps they did. "You don't understand what house you're living in." "Then help me understand." Clara leaned closer. "Mrs. Pott, please. 7 years I have followed every rule. I have been hungry and silent and grateful, and I don't even know what I am being punished for. You've been here 40 years. You knew my father. You know why she keeps me here, don't you? You've always known." For a moment, Mrs. Pott said nothing. Somewhere above them, a bell rang, Lady Harrington's bell, sharp and impatient, and the old housekeeper flinched like a woman waking from a dream. She let go of Clara's wrists. She turned to go, and then at the kitchen door she stopped. "They made me swear on the Bible the day you arrived," she said, so quietly Clara barely caught it. "So I'll say only this, and I'll deny I ever said it." She looked back, and there were 40 years of secrets in her face. "There is a reason you are kept in this house, Miss Clara, and it is not charity. Your grandmother is not ashamed of you." Mrs. Pott drew a breath. "She is afraid of you." The bell rang again, furious now. And Mrs. Pott was gone, up the stairs, leaving Clara alone in the kitchen with a bundle of bread and cheese in her hands, and a question that changed the shape of everything. What could a starving girl in a gray dress possibly have that frightened the most powerful woman in the county? The Duke of Ashworth came back 4 days later. He came, as Lady Harrington had predicted, and the house rose to meet him like a tide. Fresh flowers in every room, Diana in a new blue gown that had cost more than a servant's yearly wage, the good silver, the good china, the good smiles. And Clara, as promised, was nowhere to be seen. She had been given her instructions the night before, delivered by her grandmother in the doorway of her small room, without so much as a good evening. His Grace dines here tomorrow. You will keep to the east wing. You will not come down. If you are seen at a window, if you are heard on a stair, if you so much as breathe in that man's direction, you will spend the winter with no fire in this room. Do I make myself understood? Yes, grandmother. The door had closed. Clara had sat down on her bed and, to her own surprise, laughed one small, tired laugh in the dark. The winter before, she had had no fire in her room either. Her grandmother had simply never noticed, or never cared. But something had changed in Clara since the night of the dinner. The words she was not supposed to have heard, "I have found her asterisk," and the words Mrs. Pott had refused to explain, "She is afraid of you," had lit a small, stubborn flame inside her that no rule could reach. For 7 years she had been a mouse, quiet, grateful, invisible. But nobody searches for a mouse, and nobody fears one. She kept to the east wing, exactly as ordered. What her grandmother had forgotten, because her grandmother never read, was that the east wing held the library. It was the one room in Harrington Hall that belonged in any true way to Clara. Nobody else ever entered it. The fires were never lit there, the dust lay soft on the shelves, and the tall windows looked out over the rose garden. Clara had spent 7 winters reading there in her coat and gloves. It was cold, but it was hers. She was curled in the window seat that afternoon, deep in a book of her father's old favorites, when the door opened behind her. "I was told," said a voice, "that this house had no library worth seeing." Clara shot to her feet so quickly, the book tumbled to the floor. The Duke of Ashworth stood in the doorway, alone. "Your Grace," her heart was hammering, you should not be here, that is," she caught herself. "One did not tell a duke where he should be. I mean, the family is in the drawing room. If you've lost your way, I can." "I have not lost my way." He stepped inside and closed the door halfway, enough for privacy, not enough for scandal, and the care he took over that small distance told her he had thought about it. "Your cousin is playing the pianoforte. I found I needed some air, and your grandmother assured me there was nothing in the east wing but dust and old paper." He bent, picked up her fallen book, and looked at the spine. "The Voyages of Captain Harwood," something flickered across his face. "My father had this exact edition. He used to read it aloud." He held it out to her. "It is not a common book." "It was my father's," Clara said. "It's the only one of his I managed to keep. The rest were sold when—" She stopped, careful. "It's not a common book, as you say." The Duke was watching her with those steady gray eyes, and Clara had the strangest feeling, the same feeling she'd had at dinner, that he was not discovering her but confirming her. The way a man checks a map against a coastline he has already studied. "You are not at the drawing room today, Miss Clara," he said. "I am unwell." She said it flatly, so he would hear the lie and know it was not hers. "Of course. And at dinner last week, you were seated behind the lilies at the end of the table because—" "I like lilies, Your Grace." A short silence. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It changed his whole face. That laugh made him younger, and Clara found herself smiling before she could stop it. It felt strange on her face, muscles out of practice. "May I ask you something impertinent, Miss Clara?" "Everyone else does, Your Grace, but they don't usually ask permission first." "How much do you remember of your father?" The smile faded from her lips. Of all the questions in the world, she had not expected that one, and yet hadn't she? I have found her. Why do you ask? Humor me. I remember everything, Clara said quietly. I remember our house by the sea. I remember that he laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them. I remember he was gone for months at a time on business, and when he came home he always said the same thing, well, Clara Bird, the world is still round. Her throat tightened. I was 15 when his heart failed. I remember that too. The Duke had gone very still. And did he leave you nothing? No papers, no keepsakes, nothing of his own. You ask strange questions for a man who came to hear the pianoforte. Yes, he agreed, I do. And because he did not lie to her, because he was the first person in 7 years who had not bothered to lie to her, Clara answered. There was no money, if that's what you mean. Grandmother has told me so 1,000 times. Everything was debts. All I have of him is that book. She hesitated. Her hand rose without her quite deciding it to the thin chain at her neck. And this. She drew it out from under her collar, a small, worn oval locket, old gold gone soft with age. It was my mother's. Father gave it to me the last time he left. He made me promise to keep it on. He was odd about it, almost stern, and he was never stern. It doesn't even open. The hinge is sealed or broken. It's worth nothing. Grandmother calls it my asterisk beggar's brass. She looked up, and the words died in her mouth. The Duke of Ashworth was staring at the locket the way other men stare at a ghost. The color had gone from his face. His hand moved half an inch, as though to reach for it, then stopped, closed into a fist, and returned to his side. When he spoke, his voice was carefully, perfectly level, and that was how she knew. Miss Clara, listen to me. He glanced at the half-open door, then back to her, and dropped his voice low. Wear that locket always, under your dress, out of sight. Do not show it to anyone in this house. Do not speak of it. And if anyone should ask you for it, anyone at all. Footsteps in the corridor. A woman's voice, bright and sharp as broken glass. Your Grace, have you lost your way? Diana. The Duke stepped back from Clara in one smooth motion, picked a book from the shelf at random, and was 3 feet away examining it by the time the door swung open. He did it so quickly, so cleanly, that Clara understood one more thing about him. He had done this sort of thing before. Here you are. Diana's smile swept the room and hardened when it found Clara. And here is my little cousin, feeling asterisk better, dearest. How wonderful. Grandmother will be so pleased to hear you're up and about. The threat wore a ribbon, but it was a threat. His Grace was looking for a book, Clara said. His Grace, Diana said sweetly, taking his arm, is missed in the drawing room. The Duke allowed himself to be led away. At the door he paused and turned, and for 2 seconds his eyes met Clara's over Diana's golden head, and he finished his sentence from before as though they had never been interrupted. Silently, a small shake of the head, a glance at her collar where the locket had already disappeared. If anyone asks you for it, refuse. Then he was gone, and Diana's laughter tinkled away down the corridor, and Clara stood alone in the cold library with her hand pressed flat against her chest. Beneath her palm, beneath the gray wool, the little locket lay against her heart. It's worth nothing, she had said. So why, thought Clara, did the richest man in 3 counties look at it as though it were the most valuable thing in England? Diana said nothing to their grandmother about the library. That was the first sign that something had shifted, because Diana told their grandmother everything. Tale-bearing was how she had been raised. It was rewarded in that house the way kindness is rewarded in better ones. But this she kept for herself, and Clara soon learned why. Diana did not want Clara punished. Punished girls disappear quietly, and Diana did not want Clara to disappear quietly. She wanted Clara to disappear in front of him. It began with the dress. There was to be another dinner, the 3rd in as many weeks, because the Duke kept accepting invitations, and Lady Harrington had begun to speak of Diana's future with a certainty that made the whole house nervous. This time, several important families were invited to witness what the county was already calling asterisk and understanding. And this time, strangely, Clara was ordered to attend. "The Framptons asked after you," her grandmother said coldly, as though the words tasted spoiled. "It seems His Grace mentioned you to Lady Frampton. Charming, quiet girl," he said. "So you will come down, you will be charming, you will be quiet, and you will prove to the county that this family has nothing to hide. You will wear the green silk. It's being pressed." The green silk. Diana's cast-off, but the finest thing Clara owned, the only dress in which she did not look like a shadow. Mrs. Pott had taken it in herself and put fresh ribbon at the sleeves, and when Clara had tried it on, the old housekeeper had gone quiet and said, "There you are, Miss Clara. There's your mother's face." On the evening of the dinner, 1 hour before the guests arrived, Clara went up to dress. The green silk lay on her bed, pressed and ready. Across the front of it, from shoulder to hem, ran a river of black ink. The bottle itself had been placed neatly, deliberately, without one drop spilled anywhere else, in the middle of the skirt, like a signature. No accident in the world is that tidy. It was not meant to look like an accident. It was meant to look like exactly what it was. Clara stood over the ruined dress and waited for the tears to come, and found, to her own quiet astonishment, that none did. A year ago she would have wept. A month ago, even. But the girl who had eaten the Duke's dinner from the Duke's own plate, the girl carrying a secret against her heart on a chain, that girl looked down at the ink and understood something with sudden, cold clarity. You don't destroy a shadow's dress. Nobody fears a shadow. Mrs. Pott was right. She had power in this house. She didn't know what it was yet, but Diana's ink had just confirmed it existed. So Clara did the one thing nobody in Harrington Hall would expect. She went downstairs anyway. She put on the gray wool dress, the plain one, the everyday one, the one that said "This is what they give me." And she walked into that glittering drawing room at 5 minutes past the hour, head high, and she watched her grandmother's face freeze and Diana's mouth fall open. Because a girl in gray wool among silks tells a story, and every guest in that room could read it. "Clara, dearest," her grandmother's voice could have frozen the fire in the grate, "you were to wear the green." "The green met with an accident, grandmother," Clara smiled pleasantly. "Ink, a whole bottle. You may see it yourself after dinner. It's really quite remarkable how it happened. But I knew you would rather I came down poorly dressed than insult your guests by hiding upstairs. This family has nothing to hide." Her grandmother's own words, handed back to her in front of the county, with a curtsy. Somewhere near the fireplace, someone made a small sound, a laugh, quickly strangled by a cough. Clara did not need to look to know it was the Duke. Diana's face had gone from white to scarlet, and when the party moved in to dinner, the Duke offered his arm, as rank demanded, to Lady Harrington. But at the table in front of Lady Frampton and the vicar and all the silk in the county, he turned to Clara in the gray wool dress and spoke to her as though she were the guest of honor. Her father's books, the sea, Captain Harwood's voyages. He asked her opinions, and then, this was the thing no one in that house had ever done, he listened to them. Diana played the pianoforte after dinner, brilliantly, desperately. The Duke applauded politely and asked Clara whether she played. "No, Your Grace. My education ended at 15. "Odd," said the Duke, to no one in particular, cracking a walnut. "I understood there was money set aside for it." He said it lightly, idly, the way a man drops a coin down a well just to hear how deep it goes. Clara saw it strike bottom. She saw her grandmother's fan stop moving, saw the old woman's ringed fingers go rigid against the black lace of her skirt, saw, for one unguarded instant, something in Lady Harrington's eyes that Clara had never seen there in 7 years. Fear. Then the fan resumed and the moment closed over like water. "Your Grace has been misinformed," Lady Harrington said smoothly. "My son died in debt. It is a family sorrow. We do not speak of it." "Forgive me," said the Duke, and smiled and cracked another walnut. But he had not been misinformed, and now everyone at that table knew it, most of all Clara. Retribution came the next morning, and it came wearing Diana's sweetest smile. "Grandmother says you're to make yourself useful since you're so fond of being seen asterisk," Diana announced at the door of Clara's room. "The study is to be turned out and cleaned before Michaelmas. Every shelf, every cupboard. Grandmother has gone to Lady Frampton's for the day, and I am not to touch dust in my condition. She was not in any condition unless spite counts. So it falls to you. Meg will help you with the heavy things." Punishment dressed as housekeeping, a day on her knees in her grandmother's study. Diana delivered it with relish and flounced away, satisfied. It was, though neither of them knew it yet, the worst mistake Diana would ever make. Lady Harrington's study was the one room in the house that was always locked. The maids cleaned it once a season, under supervision. Clara had been inside it perhaps 5 times in 7 years, always to stand on the carpet and receive judgment. Now she knelt in it alone, sleeves rolled, washing the shelves, while Meg the housemaid hauled the curtains down to beat them outside. It happened because of a mouse. The mouse shot out from behind the great oak writing desk. Meg shrieked and dropped her end of the curtain rod. The rod struck the desk, and the bottom drawer of the desk, the deep one, the one with the brass lock, slid open half an inch. Not because the rod had broken it, because it had been unlocked all along and merely stuck, perhaps for years. The one drawer in the one locked room, and the key had not been needed after all. "Oh, miss, I never," Meg was babbling, terrified. "I'll fetch the—" "Take the curtains down to the yard," Clara heard herself say, in a voice that was calm and did not seem to be entirely her own. "I'll see to the desk. Go on. You've done nothing wrong." Meg fled gratefully. And Clara, who had followed every rule for 7 years, knelt in front of her grandmother's desk, took hold of the brass handle, and pulled the drawer open. It was full of letters, dozens of them. Neat bundles tied with black ribbon, stacked with an old woman's terrible tidiness. Years and years of them, the paper at the bottom gone yellow, the paper at the top still white. Every envelope had been slit cleanly open. In every envelope, Clara's hands began to shake as she lifted bundle after bundle, as the dates ran backward through the years, 7 years, all 7 years. Letter after letter after letter, every single envelope bore, in a strong slanting hand she did not recognize, the same 2 words. Miss Clara. They were hers. They had always been hers. Somewhere out in the world, for 7 years, someone had been writing to a girl who never once wrote back because she never knew. Clara sat back on her heels in the silent study, a bundle of stolen years in her hands, and asked the empty room the only question left. Who? Clara knew she had minutes, not hours. Meg was in the yard beating curtains. Her grandmother was at Lady Frampton's, but Lady Frampton bored her, and she never stayed past 4. Diana was somewhere in the house, and Diana had a hunting dog's instinct for other people's secrets. Every rule Clara had ever obeyed said, "Close the drawer." She untied the first bundle. The letters at the top were the newest, so she began at the bottom instead, with the oldest, the yellowed ones, the ones written the very year she came to Harrington Hall. The paper was heavy and expensive. The hand was strong and slanted, an old man's hand trying not to look like one. My dear Miss Clara, asterisk. You will not remember me, though I held you at your christening and dropped the prayer book, which your father never once let me forget. I was his oldest friend. I am also, by the promise I made him and by the paper he signed, your godfather. I learned only last month of his death, being abroad when it happened, too late for the funeral, too late, it seems, for much else. I have written to your grandmother 3 times regarding your welfare and have received no reply. I write now to you directly. Whatever you may have been told, child, you are not alone in the world, and you are not a beggar in it. Your father was my friend for 40 years. He was also, whatever his family believed, a very careful man. Before his last voyage, he left certain matters in my keeping, matters that concern you, and you alone, and which I am bound to place in your hands when you are of age, or sooner if I judge your situation requires it. Write to me, Clara Bird. Your father called you that. I hope you will permit an old man the same liberty. Your devoted godfather, Edmund Ashworth. The letter trembled in Clara's hands. Ashworth. She sat very still on the floor of her grandmother's study, and the pieces her whole life had been broken into began, slowly, terribly, to slide together. The Duke's father, the old Duke of Ashworth, her father's oldest friend. Her godfather, she had a godfather, she'd had one all along, a man who dropped prayer books and called her Clara Bird, and for 7 years he had been on the other end of a one-way corridor of stolen letters, writing into silence. My father had this exact edition, the young Duke had said, holding Captain Harwood in the cold library. He used to read it aloud. He had not been making conversation. He had been laying her father's book beside his father's book, the coastline against the map. Clara read on. She could not have stopped if the house had been burning. The letters marched forward through the years, and they told a story in one voice. A story of a man growing first puzzled, then suspicious, then afraid. The 2nd year, I have had a reply at last, not from you but from Lady Harrington, informing me that you want no contact with your father's associates and that further letters will be burned. I do not believe the first claim. I note that the letters are evidently not being burned. Your grandmother is too careful a woman to destroy anything that might one day be useful, so I will keep writing. If even one reaches you, it will have been worth the ink. The 4th year, I made inquiries through my solicitor who was refused at the door. I am told you are sickly, that you see no one, that you are, this word was used, simple. Clara, I knew your father. I sat him out through storms at sea and worse storms in banks. If his daughter is simple, I am the King of Spain. The 5th year, I am watched now too in my way. Twice my letters to the county solicitor have gone astray. Your grandmother has a long arm and longer credit, and she has spent a great deal of the latter lately, on what no one can say, since the estate she claims to hold produces nothing like what she spends. I begin to understand, Clara Bird, and what I understand frightens me. It is not that she has forgotten to answer for you. It is that she cannot afford to. Clara's hands were ice. Down in the yard, faintly, she could hear Meg still beating the curtains. Keep beating them, Meg, please. The 6th year, and here the strong slanted hand had begun to waver, the letters shorter, the ink pressed harder. My health is failing. My doctors are dull men who tell me dull things, and for once I believe them. So I must set down plainly what I have hinted at for 6 years, and pray this letter is opened by no one but you, though I know by now they all are. Let her read it then. Let her know that I know. Your father did not die in debt. Your father died rich, Clara. Rich from 20 years of ventures your grandmother's family called vulgar right up until they needed the money. Before his last voyage, he settled everything on you, everything, in a trust, with conditions I helped him write and a copy I hold still. And he left you one thing more. He left you the proof of it and the means to claim it in the last place anyone would think to look, because your father knew his mother, God rest him, far better than she ever knew him. The locket is the key, Clara Bird, your mother's locket. Do not let them take it from you. Never, never let them take it from you. If I do not live to see you of age, my son will finish what I could not. He knows everything. He has promised me, and he does not break promises, being in that one respect better than his father. Look for him, Clara. He will come. He will find you. Your devoted godfather, Edmund Ashworth. There was one more letter after it. A different hand, younger, harder, blacker ink. Clara knew before she opened it what it would say, and whose hand it was, because she had watched that hand slide a dinner plate across white linen 3 weeks ago. It was dated 8 months past. It was very short. Lady Harrington. My father died on Tuesday. Among his papers, all of it is preserved. Every letter, every date, every account. I write to you once as he would have wished to offer you the chance to make this right quietly. You will not take it. He told me you would not. Then know this. What my father pursued out of love, I will now pursue as a debt of honor, and I am told I have less patience than he had. You have something that belongs to Miss Clara. Miss Clara has something that belongs to her. I intend that the two shall be united. I do not make threats, I make appointments. Ashworth *. I do not make threats, I make appointments. Clara pressed the letter to her chest and laughed and wept at the same time, silently, kneeling on her grandmother's carpet because the dinner. He had not come courting Diana at all. The invitation, the pheasant, the plate sliding across the linen. The Duke of Ashworth had walked into this house keeping a dead man's promise, and Lady Harrington had risen to greet him with her best silver, never dreaming that she herself had received his appointment 8 months before, opened it, read it, and filed it in a drawer with everything else, because Edmund Ashworth had been right about her to the very end. Your grandmother is too careful a woman to destroy anything that might one day be useful. Her carefulness had just become Clara's evidence. 7 years of it, tied in black ribbon. Clara knelt in the ruins of every lie she had been fed. There was no money. You are a burden. Charity begins at home. And felt the locket burning against her skin like a live coal, and understood at last why a starving girl in a gray dress could frighten the most powerful woman in the county. Because the girl was not a charity case. The girl was the * heiress, and the whole house was living on her inheritance. She never heard the study door open. "Well," said Lady Harrington from the doorway. Clara's blood stopped. Her grandmother stood perfectly composed in her black afternoon silk, gloves still on, bonnet still on, home early from Lady Frampton's, and her eyes traveled slowly, almost peacefully from Clara's face to the open drawer, to the letters scattered on the carpet like the feathers of a shot bird. "Meg let a mouse frighten her, I suppose," Lady Harrington said. "I must remember to dismiss her." She stepped inside. She closed the door behind her. The key turned in the lock with a small, neat, terrible click. "Now then, Clara." Her grandmother drew off her gloves, one finger at a time. "It seems you can read after all. Shall we discuss what happens to girls who open other people's drawers?" Lady Harrington did not shout. That was the thing Clara would remember afterward, that her grandmother never once raised her voice. She laid her gloves on the desk, smoothed them flat, and looked down at the letters on the carpet the way a housekeeper looks at a stain. "Sit down, Clara." "I'll stand." "Sit * down." Clara sat. 22 years old, and the habit of obedience folded her into the chair before her mind could object. She hated herself for it. Her grandmother saw the hate and smiled. "You've read them then, all of them?" Lady Harrington moved slowly around the desk. "Of course you have. You're his daughter. He could never leave anything alone either." She lowered herself into the great chair behind the desk, unhurried, a queen returning to her throne. "Very well. You've been playing at discovery all afternoon. Ask your questions. You will never have another chance, so I advise you to make them good ones." And Clara understood with a chill why her grandmother was so calm. "She doesn't think it matters. She doesn't think I can do anything at all." "Is it true?" Clara's voice came out low. "The money, the trust, is it true my father died rich?" "Her father," Lady Harrington said, "died vulgar *. There is a difference, though the bank refuses to recognize it." She folded her hands. "He was offered everything a gentleman's son could want, a commission, the church, a respectable marriage. I had 3 arranged before his 20th birthday. He refused them all and went into * trade *. She pronounced the word the way other people pronounce a disease. Ships, cargo, warehouses in Bristol that smelled of tar and foreigners. His father forbade it. He went anyway. His father cut him off. He thrived. Do you know what it is, Clara, to be humiliated by a son's success? To have the county whisper that the Harringtons sneered at trade until trade made their boy richer than the lot of them. So the sin, Clara said slowly, was that he was right. Something flickered across the old woman's face, the first crack in all those years of porcelain. The sin was that he married Asterisk, some merchant's daughter with sea air in her manners and one locket to her name. And when they were both dead, she first, then him, hearts, both of them, weak hearts run in vulgar blood. Do you know what he left me? His own mother. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to something almost intimate. A asterisk stipend, a managing allowance. I was to be the paid caretaker of his brat, funded quarterly, audited annually, until the girl came of age at 25 or married, and swept the whole fortune off to whatever nobody she chose. My son put me on wages, Clara, in my own family. That was his gratitude. So you buried the will. I managed the situation. Lady Harrington sat back. The solicitor who held the local copy was elderly and agreeable. Documents are mislaid every day. The London Trust was harder. Trusts are stubborn things. They release nothing without their conditions met. But trusts also sleep, child, when no one wakes them. The trustees believe you sickly and simple and utterly indifferent to your affairs. They have believed it for 7 years because I write to them twice a year on your behalf. In a girl's hand I have had a great deal of time to perfect. The income accumulates. Loans may be raised against expectations if one knows the right dull men. And no one wakes the trust as long as you remain unmarried, unseen, and exactly what I have made you. The room was very quiet. Down in the yard, Meg had stopped beating the curtains. Diana's gowns, Clara said. The dinners, the new carriage, all of it is mine. All of it is managed asterisk, her grandmother corrected pleasantly. You've been fed, haven't you? Housed, clothed. You starved me. I asterisk disciplined asterisk you. For the first time, real feeling entered the old woman's voice, and the horror of it was that the feeling was pride. Do you imagine it was easy? 7 years of keeping you small. A girl left alone grows hopes, and hopeful girls are noticed, and noticed girls are courted, and courted girls asterisk marry, and the day you marry, Clara, the trust wakes, the accounts open, and everything I have built collapses into scandal. So no. No music masters. No seasons. No vicar's wife carrying you off to Bath. Half portions and grey wool and a shadow's manners, not cruelty, child. Precision. I kept you alive and I kept you invisible, and it worked for 7 years, and it would have worked forever. She stopped. If that man's son had not started sliding his dinner across my table. And there it was. Clara heard the one thing hiding under all that porcelain calm, the thing Mrs. Pott had named in the kitchen, fear. Old Edmund Ashworth, writing patiently into the dark for 6 years, had been an annoyance. His son, young, rich, unblinking, sitting at her own table saying I understood there was money set aside while cracking walnuts, was a catastrophe on horseback. He knows, Clara said. He has his father's copies, dates, accounts. You read his letter, he told you what he intends, and you filed it in a drawer. Why are you telling me all this? Why confess it to my face? Confess? Lady Harrington looked genuinely amused. Child, one confesses to those who can bear witness. You will bear none. As of this evening you are ill. Gravely, sadly ill. The whole county saw you at dinner in that grey rag, behaving so asterisk, strangely asterisk, poor creature. Lady Frampton remarked on it herself, or will, once I have described it to her properly. Dr. Kell will attend you. Dr. Kell has attended this family for 30 years and owes it more than he can repay. You will be confined for your own protection, and if His Grace of Ashworth comes calling with his father's old papers, he will find a sadly familiar story. A weak-blooded girl, gone at last the way her mother's people go. Delicate, confused, simple. Who is the county to believe, Clara? A duke with a dead man's grievance and no asterisk original asterisk documents, or the devoted grandmother who nursed a failing girl for 7 long years and 2 physicians' signatures? She rose from the desk. She crossed the carpet, silk whispering, and stood over Clara, and for a moment, one strange, awful moment, she reached out and touched Clara's cheek, almost gently, the way she must once, long ago, have touched her son's. You were never anything but a ledger to me, she said softly. But I will say this for you, you balanced beautifully. Then she straightened, and the gentleness was gone as though it had never existed, and she held out one ringed hand, palm open. Now there remains a single loose thread. The trustees require, for the release of the estate, proof of identity and the settlor's token, your father's little riddle, his last piece of Bristol cleverness. He thought hiding it in plain sight was witty. He thought I would never stoop to notice a beggar's trinket. The open palm did not waver. I have let you wear it for 7 years, Clara, because a locked box is safest on a fool's neck, but the Duke has seen it now. I watched his face at dinner when you touched your collar, so. The rings caught the late light. The voice was almost kind. Give me the locket. Give me the locket. Clara looked at the open palm, at the rings, at the 7 years standing over her in black silk, and somewhere inside her, very quietly, a door that had always been open swung shut. No. The word came out small. It came out steady. It was, Clara realized, the first time in her life she had ever said it to her grandmother's face. Lady Harrington's palm did not move. I beg your pardon. You heard me perfectly well, grandmother. You hear everything in this house. Clara rose from the chair slowly, her knees water, her voice somehow not. It was my mother's. It is mine. My father put it around my neck himself, and you will take it off my body or not at all. For a long moment the two women looked at each other, and Clara saw her grandmother do something she had never seen before. Recalculate. Very well, Lady Harrington said at last pleasantly. Off your body then, but not today. I am not a violent woman and there is no need. You are about to be very ill, child. Ill girls are undressed by others, bathed by others, tended entirely by others. Everything they wear passes through other hands. She drew on her gloves, one finger at a time. You will be relieved of it within the week, along with your good sense, your reputation, and your visitors. There is no drama required, only patience. I have a great deal of patience. She rang the bell. 2 footmen came, Thomas and John, men Clara had known for 7 years, men whose names she knew, whose Sunday coats she had mended, and neither would look at her. Miss Clara is unwell, Lady Harrington told them. Take her to the blue room in the attic. She is to rest undisturbed until Dr. Kell arrives. Remove anything she might harm herself with. She has been saying such wild things, poor child. And that was all. No shouting, no struggle. Just 2 embarrassed men and a staircase that went up and up, past the floor where the family slept, past the floor where the servants slept, to a low white door under the roof beams. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single round window too small for anything but light. The key turned behind her. Clara stood in the middle of the little room, and her legs finally gave, and she sat down hard on the narrow bed and pressed both hands over her mouth so that no one would have the satisfaction of hearing her. Ill girls are undressed by others. She had perhaps a day, maybe 2 if Dr. Kell was slow on the roads. Clara raised her head and looked around the attic room, bare walls, bare boards, 1 window, and then down at her own chest, where the locket lay burning against her skin. Think, Clara Bird, you are your father's daughter, think. The round window did not open far, but it opened. Below it, 1 story down, ran the flat lead roof of the kitchen wing, and along the edge of that roof, Clara had seen them from the garden 1,000 times, stood Mrs. Potts' geraniums. A row of clay pots, old and heavy, tended by the housekeeper on Sunday afternoons for 40 years. Nobody else touched them. Nobody else was permitted to. Diana called them the old woman's graveyard. Clara took the chain from her neck. She kissed the little gold oval once, forgive me, Mama, it's only for a while, wrapped it in her handkerchief, and bound the bundle tight with the ribbon from her hair. Then she reached her arm out into the cold evening air, took aim at the 3rd pot from the left, the biggest, the one with the split rim, and let it fall. The bundle dropped, struck the soft-packed earth at the base of the geranium, and slid down between stem and clay rim out of sight. From above, nothing. From the garden, nothing. Just an old flower pot on a kitchen roof. Clara drew her head back in and closed the window, and when the maid came an hour later, A new maid, a stranger, hired that very evening, because strangers asked no questions, and took away Clara's pins and her sash and searched her collar with apologetic fingers. She found a chain's faint mark on the girl's neck and nothing on it at all. There was a necklace, the maid reported downstairs. There was, Lady Harrington agreed calmly. Search the room. They searched the room. They searched it twice. They took up the mattress and ran their hands along every beam. An old flower pot on the kitchen roof held its geranium up to the moon and said nothing. The Duke of Ashworth came to dinner 2 days later. He came because the invitation had not been withdrawn. Lady Harrington was far too careful for that. A cancelled dinner breeds questions, and questions were the one crop she had never allowed on her land. Better to seat the county, serve the pheasant, and let everyone see for themselves how serene Harrington Hall remained. The table was perfect. The silver blazed. Diana wore rose-colored silk and laughed at everything. And at the far end of the table, behind the vase of lilies, stood one empty chair. The Duke saw it before he had taken 3 steps into the room. Clara, watching nothing from her attic, she could see only sky, could not know it. But Mrs. Pott, serving that night because a footman had been dismissed, watched His Grace of Ashworth look at that empty chair the way a general looks at a map. "I hope Miss Clara is not unwell," he said when the soup came. Alas, Lady Harrington's face arranged itself into sorrow. "Our dear girl has taken a bad turn, her nerves, well. Your Grace saw for yourself at our last dinner how altered she seemed, the grey dress, the wild talk. It is in her mother's blood, I fear. Dr. Kell is attending her and we pray, but the small, brave sigh of a martyr. We have sent word to Lady Frampton to postpone the harvest visit. Family must come first." "Of course," said the Duke. He said almost nothing else for the rest of dinner. He was charming to Diana and correct to the vicar, and he ate everything he was served, and only Mrs. Pott, refilling his glass, close enough to see, noticed that his eyes went between every course to the empty chair behind the lilies, not with sorrow, with arithmetic. When the carriage was brought round and Lady Harrington stood in the doorway performing her farewells, the Duke paused to compliment the house, the gardens, the kitchens, the pheasant. "Truly, my compliments, and mighty trouble the housekeeper for the receipt." His own cook despaired of pheasant. "Mrs. Pott would be honored," said Lady Harrington, who could see no danger in a recipe. And so, for 90 seconds, in the lamplight of the great door, the Duke of Ashworth bent his head over an old woman's murmured instructions about hanging time and juniper. And no one standing 6 feet away could possibly have seen the small, folded square of paper that passed from his glove into her apron pocket, because no one ever watches the hands of servants. "Thank you, Mrs. Pott," said the Duke, climbing into his carriage. "I shall follow it exactly." "Do, Your Grace," said Mrs. Pott. "Exactly." The house went dark by 11. At midnight, Clara woke to a sound at the attic door, the smallest sound in the world, metal learning a lock. Then the door breathed open, and a candle came through it, and above the candle was the round, terrified, resolute face of a woman who had sworn on a Bible 7 years ago and had spent every day since regretting it. 40 years in this house," Mrs. Pott whispered, "and it took me until tonight to steal the right key. Get up, Miss Clara, dress warm, quiet as mice, now quieter." "Mrs. Pott," Clara was already up, already reaching for her shoes, her heart slamming. "They'll know it was you. She'll destroy you. She'll have to stand in line." The old woman pressed a folded square of paper into Clara's hands and held the candle close so she could read it. 6 words, in a strong black hand Clara had last seen at the bottom of a letter that made appointments instead of threats. "North fence, the elm, I'm waiting." "He's been there since 11, Mrs. Pott whispered. "Now down the back stair, through the still room, out by the kitchen yard." And Miss Clara, her old hand caught Clara's sleeve and her whisper dropped even lower. "The kitchen yard. You'll pass under the flat roof. 3rd pot from the left is missing its geranium. I dug it up myself this evening and replanted it, and what I found among the roots is wrapped in oilcloth under the rim, waiting for you." Next time, child, choose the asterisk fourth asterisk pot. The third has the split rim. It drains onto the yard and I check it after every rain. Clara, halfway to the door, stopped and stared at her. You knew all this time since when? Since Tuesday, when my geranium was sitting crooked. Mrs. Potts' face in the candlelight achieved something between a smile and tears. 40 years, Miss Clara, I have kept that woman's house. Did you think I wouldn't notice a change in asterisk soil? Now G.O. Clara went down the servant's stair in her stocking feet, shoes in hand, past the sleeping floors of the house that had starved her, through the still room that smelled of apples, out into the cold, wide shock of the night air. The kitchen yard, the flat roof, the third pot, rim split, earth fresh turned. Her fingers found the oilcloth packet and the small, hard oval inside it, and she pressed it to her lips and slung the chain over her neck where it belonged. The moon was up. The north fence lay 400 yards off across the silvered grass, and against the black shape of the great elm, blacker still, stood a carriage with its lamps shrouded, waiting, exactly as promised, because some men make appointments. Clara gathered her skirts and ran. She had crossed half the lawn, the house behind her, the elm ahead, her whole life balanced on the length of a garden, when a shape stepped out of the shadow of the yew hedge directly into her path, and the moonlight fell full on rose-colored silk. Diana. Diana. Rose-colored silk, silver in the moonlight. She stood square in Clara's path, 10 feet away, and behind her the great dark bulk of Harrington Hall waited with all its windows like closed eyes, one scream from opening. Clara stopped dead on the wet grass. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The elm was 200 yards away. It might as well have been in France. For a moment neither of them moved. The wind stirred the yew hedge. Somewhere far off, the Duke's horses shifted in their harness. Diana! Clara's voice came out low and even, though nothing inside her was either. Please. Please, Diana repeated softly. There's a word I've never heard you say to me. 7 years in the same house, and we've never once begged each other for anything. Isn't that strange, Clara? Sisters do. Friends do. We never did. Diana, listen to me. You don't know what she is. You don't know what she's done. I know exactly what she's done. The words fell into the dark garden like stones into a well. Clara stared at her. I've known since I was 17, Diana said. Her voice was strange, flat, quiet, stripped of the tinkling music it wore in drawing rooms, and without the music it sounded years older. I wasn't supposed to. I was fetching her shawl and the study door was open and she was talking to Dr. Kell about the trustee's letter, about how to phrase asterisk your asterisk letter, the one she writes twice a year in your hand. I stood in that corridor for 4 minutes. Then I brought her the shawl and smiled and said nothing. A pause. I've been smiling and saying nothing for 5 years. You knew asterisk. Something hot rose in Clara's chest. 5 years of half portions, of gray wool, of ink poured on green silk. You knew it was my money, my father's money. You knew and you wore the gowns it bought, and you poured ink on the one decent dress I. Yes, Diana said. Just that, no excuse behind it, and the plainness of it took the fire out of Clara faster than any excuse could have. Do you want to know why? Diana wrapped her arms around herself. In the moonlight in her rose silk on the lawn of the great house, she suddenly looked cold, a cold that had nothing to do with the night air. Because you were the lucky one. Clara almost laughed. Lucky asterisk. You got the hunger, I got the hope. Diana's voice didn't rise, and somehow that was worse. Do you know what my earliest memory is, Clara? Posture boards. Backboards they strap to your shoulders. I wore them 4 hours a day from the age of 6 because a Harrington girl does not slouch. I was weighed every Sunday. If the number displeased her, I didn't dine that week either. Oh, you didn't know that, did you? Yours was done at the table in front of everyone. Mine was done upstairs, politely. You're not hungry, are you, Diana dearest? Good girl. She recited it lightly in their grandmother's exact cadence, and hearing that voice come out of Diana's mouth in the dark made the hair stand up on Clara's arms. I learned pianoforte until my fingers bled. She checked them for calluses. Calluses are vulgar. I learned French, dancing, drawing, archery, everything a duchess needs. Because that's what I was, Clara, from the day my parents died and I came here 3 years before you. I was the investment. You were the vault and I was the investment, and neither of us was ever, for one single day, a asterisk child. Somewhere in the house behind them, a clock struck the half hour, thin and silvery through the walls. She built me to catch a duke, Diana said, and the duke came, and he sat at our table and I played the piece I have practiced for 11 years without one wrong note, and he asked whether asterisk you played. A small, terrible smile. You, in your gray dress with your ruined hem. That was the moment I understood I had spent my whole life training for a race that was never going to be run. He didn't come for a duchess, did he? He came for the vault. Diana. Don't, Diana held up one hand. Don't you dare pity me, anything but that. She looked back at the house, the closed windows, the dark bulk of it, and when she turned again to Clara, her face in the moonlight had changed. The bitterness was still there, but something else had risen through it, something Clara couldn't name at first because she had so rarely seen it at Harrington Hall. Resolve. I came out here to stop you, Diana said. You should know that. When the house was locked up, I saw Pot take a candle up the back stair. The woman has never in her life carried a candle upstairs. She goes to bed at 9, and I knew. I stood at my window and I watched you cross the yard and dig in her flower pots, and I put on my cloak to come and stop asterisk you, because if you leave, Clara, do you understand what happens to me if you leave? The money goes. The house goes. The trust wakes, the loans are called, the whole 7 years of it comes out, and I go down with her. Everything I am was bought with everything they stole from you. There is no version of your freedom that doesn't cost me mine. I worked that out 5 years ago, standing in a corridor with a shawl in my hands. It's why I said nothing. It's why the ink. Her voice cracked just once on the last word and she forced it flat again. I came out here to scream. The garden was utterly silent. Even the horses by the elm had gone still. So scream, Clara said quietly. Diana looked at her. Scream, Diana. The windows will light up and the footman will come, and I'll be back in the attic in 10 minutes, and Dr. Kell will sign whatever she puts in front of him, and you'll keep your gowns a little longer. Clara took one step closer toward her, not the elm. But you'll spend the rest of your life the way you've spent it so far. Weighed on Sundays, smiling and saying nothing, being an investment. And someday she'll be gone, and there will be nothing left of either of us but what she made, a vault and an investment, in a house built on a dead man's stolen money. Or, Diana's whisper was barely breath. Or you let me pass, and I swear to you on my father's grave, on my mother's locket, on the only 2 things I own, that whatever is mine at the end of this, you will not be left to drown with her. I don't forgive the ink, Diana, I'm not that good. But you were 6 years old and strapped to a board, and I know who did that to you, and it wasn't you. Clara held out her hand across the moonlit grass. We have never once begged each other for anything, so I'm not begging, I'm offering. Come to the fence with me, right now, there's room in the carriage. For a long, long moment, Diana looked at the outstretched hand. Then she stepped back. No, she said, and before Clara's heart could drop, Diana was pulling at the clasp of her own cloak, sweeping the dark wool from her shoulders, holding it out. If I vanish tonight too, she'll know within the hour, and there'll be riders on every road by 2. But if I'm at breakfast, if I'm shocked asterisk, grandmother, she must have slipped out while we slept, you by a full day's start. Maybe 2. I'm the only person in that house she almost trusts. Use it. She threw the cloak around Clara's shoulders and fastened the clasp with quick, cold fingers. And for one instant, in the dark, they were standing closer than they had stood in 7 years. The hood up, Diana said briskly. Rose silk shows at 100 yards, gray wool doesn't, she's right about that much. And then softer, so soft Clara nearly missed it. 3rd pot from the left. I watched you dig it up. I could have told her that any time these past 2 days, you know, she'd have given me anything for it. Why didn't you? Diana was quiet for a moment. When she answered, she was looking not at Clara but at the great dark house, at one particular window on the 2nd floor, behind which an old woman lay sleeping in the certainty that everything in her world was locked, filed, and balanced. Because when he slid his plate across that table, Diana said, 11 people watched and 10 of us did nothing. I've had 3 weeks to think about which of the 10 I want to be. She stepped back off the path, into the shadow of the U, making room. Go, now. And Clara, the old sharpness flashed up one last time, armor going back on. When this is over, when it's yours again, I want it in writing. I don't trust promises made on lawns. You'll have it in writing, Clara said, sister. She saw Diana flinch at the word flinch, and then, in the moon shadow of the yew hedge, very slowly smile, as though trying out an expression she had never once been trained in. Gio, said Diana. Clara ran, cloaked in borrowed black, across the last 200 yards of silver grass, past the north fence, into the shadow of the great elm, where a carriage door swung open before she reached it, and a gloved hand caught hers and swung her up and in, and a voice said drive before the door had even closed. The horses sprang. Harrington Hall slid away into the dark behind her, 7 years of it, shrinking to the size of a window, a candle, nothing. Clara sat back against the cushions, shaking, laughing, weeping all at once. Across from her, the Duke of Ashworth reached up and unshuttered the carriage lamp, and in the small gold light his gray eyes found the chain at her neck, and the question in them needed no words. Clara drew out the locket and laid it in his open palm. You'd best tell me everything, Your Grace, she said, beginning with what's inside it. The Duke turned the little gold oval over once, and pressed his thumb flat against the worn-back plate, not the hinge, the asterisk back, and slid it a quarter turn. Somewhere inside the locket that had never opened, something clicked. Not what, Miss Clara, he said. Where? The back plate of the locket slid a quarter turn and came away in the Duke's hand. There was no portrait inside, no lock of hair, no painted miniature. None of the small soft things lockets are made to hold. Inside, fitted into a bed of wax so that it would never rattle and never shift, lay a key. A tiny key, no longer than a thumbnail, cut with strange fine teeth. And beneath it, engraved into the gold of the inner plate in letters Clara had to tilt toward the lamp to read. Harwood and Sons, Bristol, Box 41. Harwood, Clara whispered. Captain Harwood, the book. Was never only a book. The Duke's voice was low. Harwood and Sons is a private bank in Bristol, old, discreet, the kind sea merchants trusted because it never asked where the money had been. Your father banked there for 20 years. My father knew that. What he never knew, what your father told no one, not even him, was the box number or where the key was hidden. He looked up from the little gold oval, and in the lamplight something moved behind his eyes that was half admiration and half grief. He put it around his daughter's neck and made her promise never to take it off. The one place his mother would never think to look, because she had spent her whole life refusing to look at you at all. Beggar's brass. Miss Clara, your father hid the key to a fortune in plain sight for 7 years, guarded by nothing but his mother's contempt. Clara looked down at the locket and her eyes burned. He was odd about it, almost stern, and he was never stern. Box 41 will hold the original trust deed, the Duke went on, fitting the plate back and returning the locket to her hands, to her, not his pocket, and she noticed that. The will, the account ledgers, whatever a careful man locks away when he suspects his own family. My father's copies establish the pattern, but copies can be argued with. Originals cannot. With what is in that box, your grandmother is finished, not scolded, not embarrassed. Finished. Then we go to Bristol. I go to Bristol. He leaned forward. Listen to me. It is 2 hard days' ride west, and you cannot appear at a merchant bank at dawn, unmarried in a Duke's traveling carriage. That story would reach London before we did, and it would arrive wearing exactly the dress your grandmother will sew for it. No. Tonight I take you to my aunt, Lady Marrow, in Wenbridge. She is my mother's sister. She is a widow of ferocious respectability, and she has been waiting up for you since Tuesday because I do make appointments, Miss Clara, and I made this one the day I saw that woman take away your plate. A breath of a smile there and gone. You will be safe, chaperoned, and unimpeachable. I ride for Bristol at first light with the key and your written authority. 4 days. 5 at the worst. Then we open the box, wake the trust, and end this. 4 days. After 7 years, it sounded like nothing at all. It would prove to be everything. Lady Marrow's house in Wenbridge smelled of lavender and beeswax, and Lady Marrow herself, small, white-haired, upright as a mast, met Clara at the door at 2 in the morning in full dress, looked her over once from ruined hem to borrowed cloak, and said only, "So you're Edmund's goddaughter. You have your father's chin. Cook is making chocolate. Nephew Bristol. Ride." For one day, Clara was happy. It shamed her a little afterward how happy sleeping past 8 in a bed with 4 pillows, eating an entire breakfast that nobody took away, walking in a walled garden in one of Lady Marrow's dead daughter's dresses, sea green, while the old lady told stories about her sister's sons. For one day, Clara let herself believe that the story was already over, that escaping the house had ended the house's power. She had forgotten who had raised her. Lady Harrington did not send riders after the carriage. She did not rage, and she did not search. She sat down at her writing desk on the very morning Diana performed her shocked innocence at breakfast, and Diana performed it flawlessly, and she did what she had always done best. She wrote. By Thursday, the county knew, from Lady Harrington's own grieving lips, in calls paid and letters sent, that poor, unstable Clara had been taken, lured from her sickbed in the night in her condition, by a man who had dined thrice at her grandmother's table under the pretense of courting her cousin. The girl was not to be blamed, of course. The girl was ill, Dr. Kell would swear to it, had sworn to it in writing, alongside a second physician, a colleague from town who had examined the patient's history most thoroughly without the inconvenience of meeting her. The papers were already before Sir William Cray, the magistrate. A grandmother's petition, that the girl be returned to her legal guardian's custody, and a commission convened to rule upon her competence. And His Grace of Ashworth. Lady Harrington was too much of a Christian to say it, naturally. She merely asked, in drawing room after drawing room, with her handkerchief pressed to her lips, what sort of man spirits a disturbed young woman out of her family's care at midnight, and where, pray, is she now? And let the county's imagination do what the county's imagination always does. By Friday, the scandal reached London. By Saturday, it reached the Duke's family, and his uncle's letter reached Wenbridge by express, addressed to Lady Marrow, and Clara, who was not meant to see it, saw her hostess read it at breakfast and go very still. The Ashworth name has survived war, debt, and your late brother-in-law's eccentricities. It will not survive a lunacy hearing. If the boy stands up in a county courtroom beside that girl, every door in London closes to him and to us. You know what must be done. Send her back and let the lawyers manage the rest quietly. There is no fortune on earth worth a family's name. Lady Marrow folded the letter, fed it to the breakfast-room fire, and said, "More chocolate, my dear." And Clara loved her for it, and was terrified all the same. Because the summons came that afternoon. A constable, apologetic and immovable, on Lady Marrow's lavender doorstep. Miss Clara Harrington, being subject to the guardianship of the Dowager Lady Harrington, is required to appear before Sir William Cray at the Sessions House on Monday morning, there to be examined touching the petition of her guardian *. Monday morning. And the Duke was in Bristol, 2 hard days' ride away, with the key around his neck now instead of hers, and no way in the world to know that the ground had been cut from under them in 5 days flat. Lady Marrow sent 3 riders west with letters. Sunday night one came back. The roads beyond Bath were drowned, a mail bridge down, the express service stopped. Of the Duke no word at all, no letter, no rider, nothing. "He will come," Lady Marrow said Monday at dawn, fastening her jet brooch like a soldier arming. "He is his father's son, he will come." But her hands, Clara saw, were not steady. The Sessions House at Wenbridge smelled of wet wool and ink. Clara sat on a hard bench in the long corridor outside the courtroom, in sea green silk that felt like borrowed armor, and watched the county arrive to enjoy her. They came in murmuring twos and threes, faces from her grandmother's dinners, Lady Frampton among them, eyes bright with the particular hunger of respectable people at someone else's ruin. Inside, she could hear the scrape of benches. Dr. Kell was there, and the second physician, a folder of paper under his arm thick enough to bury a healthy woman alive. 9 o'clock struck, the corridor filled, the courtroom doors stood open, waiting. The Duke did not come. Quarter past. Lady Marrow sat beside Clara with her spine straight and her jaw set and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. 1/2 past. A clerk came out twice and looked down the corridor toward the street doors and went back in. The murmuring around them had a rhythm to it now, a rising, satisfied hum like flies. The street doors opened at 20 to 10, and Clara's heart leapt. And Lady Harrington came in. In black silk on Dr. Kell's arm, moving down the long corridor at the pace of her own funeral procession, gracious, grieved, magnificent. The crowd parted for her. Of course it parted for her. It had been parting for her for 50 years. She stopped in front of the bench. She looked at the sea-green dress for a long moment, and at the bare place at Clara's throat where Clara realized with a stab of cold. The chain no longer hung, and something in the old woman's face settled, satisfied, like an account closing. Then she bent down close so that only Clara could hear her, the corridor packed with the whole county, and the two of them utterly alone inside it. And her whisper was gentle, almost loving, the most terrible voice Clara had ever heard. "Sea green. Your mother wore sea green the one time I met her. It didn't save her either. A soft breath of lavender and dust. Look at the doors all you like, child. I taught you your whole life the one lesson that matters, and you still haven't learned it. No one is coming." The clerk appeared in the courtroom doorway. Miss Clara Harrington. Lady Harrington straightened, smoothed her gloves, and smiled down at her granddaughter with all the warmth of a headstone. "No one is coming," she said again quietly. "No one ever came." And the terrible thing, the thing that made Clara's hands go cold in her lap as she rose from the bench to the sound of her own name, was that in 7 years, on the evidence, her grandmother had never once been wrong. The courtroom was full. Clara walked down the center of it with her chin up and her hands folded, because if 7 years at Harrington Hall had taught her nothing else, it had taught her how to be stared at while starving. Benches of county faces on either side. Sir William Cray on the raised chair, an old man with tired eyes and a cold in his head. Dr. Kell at the table below, and beside him the second physician, and the folder of paper, thick as a Bible, that said a healthy woman was mad. Lady Harrington took her place with the unhurried ease of a woman, entering her own drawing room. It went the way it had been built to go. Sir William blew his nose and read the petition aloud. That the said Miss Clara Harrington, being of unsound mind and unable to manage her person or affairs, be committed to the care and custody of her guardian Dr. Kell testified in a voice of gentle, practiced sorrow, the nervous decline, the wild accusations, the sad wandering of a disturbed girl into the night. The second physician agreed with everything in Latin, which took longer. "Miss Harrington," Sir William looked down at her, not unkindly over his spectacles. "These are grave findings. Have you anything to say to them?" Clara rose. "Only this, sir. Every word said of me this morning is a lie, and the woman who purchased the lies is sitting in the second chair, and the proof of it lies in a strong-box in Bristol, box 41 at Harwood & Sons, my father's bank. Send for it, and you will find his true will, his trust, and 7 years of my grandmother's theft written out in her own careful hand. I ask only that. Send for the box." The courtroom rustled, deliciously scandalized. Sir William glanced at the papers before him. "The court is aware of the claim," he said, and Clara's stomach dropped, because his voice had the flat sound of a door already closed. "Lady Harrington's counsel has addressed it. There is no record of any such trust in this county. The claim rests on documents said to be held by a gentleman who," He looked at the empty doorway, and the whole courtroom looked with him, and Lady Harrington permitted herself the smallest movement of her lips, "is not present." The court cannot weigh paper it has never seen, brought by a witness who does not appear. Unless the gentleman or his documents are before me by the rising of this court, I must rule upon the evidence I have. "He will come," Clara said. So the court was assured an hour ago. Sir William dipped his pen. The court is still waiting. "He will come." And her grandmother turned in her chair, slowly, for the whole county to see her patience, and looked at Clara with an expression of such tender, public pity that it took every year of Clara's training not to weep, which was of course precisely the trap. A girl who weeps in a lunacy hearing writes the verdict herself. "No one is coming, no one ever came." Sir William signed the first page. He reached for the second. And the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Afterward, the county never could agree on what it heard first, the doors or the mud. The Duke of Ashworth came up the center aisle of the Sessions House at Wenbridge looking like no duke the county had ever seen, hatless, unshaven, splashed to the collar. 3 days of hard road on him and a dispatch box under one arm, and behind him came a small neat man in black whom nobody recognized. And behind him, in traveling clothes, pale as paper but with her head high, came Diana. The courtroom did not murmur, it roared. "Your worship," the Duke's voice cut through it, hoarse with weather but perfectly level. "I must beg the court's pardon for my appearance. The bridge at Bath is down. We rode around it." He set the dispatch box on the clerk's table with a thump that silenced the room, and unlocked it with a small key that hung on a chain around his neck. "Ashworth, I believe the court has been discussing the state of my honor in my absence. I've brought the answer." "Your Grace," Sir William had gone very still, "the court recognizes you. What is that box?" The contents of Box 41, Harwood and Sons of Bristol, opened Saturday morning in the presence of the bank's senior partner, Mr. Price, who stands behind me and will swear to every seal. The small man in black bowed, removed into his custody and mine, and carried here by the fastest road left in England. "Your worship will find," he began to lay documents on the table, one by one, like a man dealing a hand he has waited years to play, the original will of Clara Harrington's father, the original deed of trust, naming his daughter sole beneficiary at 25, or upon her marriage, the trustee's true schedule of the estate, which I will summarize for the county's convenience as, not debts, ledgers in the late gentleman's hand of every account, and correspondence between Lady Harrington and the deceased solicitor Mr. Grimwade, arranging, I quote the lady's own letter of March, 7 years past, that the local copies be mislaid in such a way as cannot be mended. He looked up. "My father spent 6 years asking this woman politely. I've found I haven't his patience." "Forgeries," Lady Harrington said. She said it beautifully, sorrowful, unsurprised, a grandmother watching a plot against her family unfold exactly as feared. And such was the weight of 50 years of her that the courtroom actually paused. Clara felt it sway. "Your worship, this man has compromised my granddaughter and now produces a box full of paper to purchase his respectability. Who opened this box? His banker. Who carried it? His servant. Who benefits? Himself, a fortune hunter in a duke's coat, and my poor ill girl his instrument. I will not dignify." "Grandmother." The voice came from the aisle. Diana had stepped forward. She was gripping her own hands to keep them from shaking, and she did not look at the benches, at the county she had been built her whole life to dazzle. She looked only at the old woman in black silk, and when she spoke, it was in the flat, quiet, music-stripped voice that Clara had first heard on a moonlit lawn. "You wrote the trustees twice a year in Clara's hand. You practiced it on the backs of old invitations. I watched you burn them in the study grate, February before last, and I fished one half burned from the ashes, because I was raised in your house, grandmother, and in your house one keeps what might one day be useful." She drew a folded, scorched scrap of paper from her glove and held it out to the clerk without her eyes ever leaving the old woman's face. The hand on that paper will match the hand in the trustee's file, and it is not Clara's, and I will swear to where I found it. Dr. Kell has held your notes of hand for 11 years. The sum is £400. It's in the green ledger, second drawer, left side. The key is behind grandfather's portrait. And Clara, for one moment her voice cracked, and she forced it level the way she had been trained to force everything level. Clara was never mad. She was the only sane thing in that entire house. I ought to know. I helped drive her out of it. You could have heard a pin fall onto velvet. Diana, said Lady Harrington, and for the first time in Clara's 22 years the voice failed. Not broke, failed like a rope. Diana, everything I did, everything was for you. No, Diana said. It was for the house. I was furniture. Sir William Cray looked for a long time at the scorched paper, and at the documents ranked across his clerk's table, and at the banker, and at Dr. Kell, who had gone the color of tallow and was whispering urgently to the second physician, and finally at the old woman in black, around whom the courtroom air itself seemed to be emptying, the way a tide goes out. He took the petition, the one his pen had already half signed, and he tore it once lengthwise, and the sound of it was the loudest thing Clara had ever heard. The petition is dismissed. The physician's certificates are set aside and referred with the rest of these papers to the King's Bench, as is Lady Harrington. He blew his nose and looked over his spectacles at Clara, and his tired eyes were suddenly not unkind at all. Miss Harrington, it appears you are the most demonstrably sane person in this room. The court apologizes for the county's hospitality. You are free and, by every document before me, exceedingly rich. What happened next happened in front of 91 witnesses, was reported in 3 London papers, and was told at county dinner tables for 30 years, growing grander with each telling. But those who were truly present always insisted the truth needed no improving. The Duke of Ashworth, mud to the collar, 3 days unshaven, a scandal to look at, crossed the well of the courtroom to where Clara stood and stopped, and for a moment said nothing at all. And then, before Sir William, before Lady Frampton and the vicar and the roaring benches, before the old woman sitting motionless and finished in her black silk, he said, "Miss Clara, a month ago I watched a room full of people decide you were worth nothing, and I gave you my dinner because it was the only thing on the table that was mine to give." His voice was steady, but his hands, Clara saw, were not, and she found she loved him for the hands. You are now, as his worship observes, exceedingly rich, and I am told half of London believes I did all this to catch your fortune. So let us be clear before witnesses. Marry me, and your money shall be locked in trust to you and your children with your own choice of lawyers. I'll sign whatever they draft and be glad of it. I want none of it. I want the girl in the gray dress who said *I like lilies, your grace * to a man she had every reason to distrust. He held out his hand, palm up, open, the way his plate had come to her across the linen, the way her grandmother's hand had come at her demanding the locket, the same gesture, the opposite meaning, asking instead of taking. I have loved you, I think, since the pheasant. Do me the honor, but only if you want it. The courtroom held its breath. And Clara, who had learned at that woman's table how to be stared at, and had never once until this year been asked what she wanted, by anyone, about anything. Clara laughed, through tears in a courtroom, scandalously, gloriously out loud. "Well, your grace," she said, and put her hand in his. "It seems the world is still round." They led Lady Harrington out through the side door, past her granddaughters, and the county watched her go. She went upright. She went in silence, gloves smooth, spine straight, magnificent to the last, and utterly, absolutely alone, because at the door Lady Frampton turned her face away, and the vicar's wife studied her prayer book, and the rows of silk that had parted for her for 50 years did not part now. They simply, quietly turned their backs, one bench after another, like candles going out. At the threshold she stopped. She looked back once, not at Clara and not at Diana, but at the table where the ledgers lay open in the light, all her careful, patient, balanced years spread out for strangers to read. Everything accounted for, she said, to no one at all. Then the door closed behind her, and the two sisters stood together in the roar of the courtroom, the vault and the investment, free on the same morning, and above the noise Diana leaned close to Clara's ear and said, in a voice with the first unbroken laugh in it that Clara had ever heard from her, "I want it in writing." 1 year later, Ashworth Park had 206 rooms, and for the first time in a generation, none of them felt empty. It was late September, and the long dining table was laid for 14, which at Ashworth, under the new Duchess, meant something quite particular. It meant Lady Marrow at the foot, upright as a mast, arguing happily with the vicar about roses. It meant Mr. Price the banker, who had ridden around a drowned bridge with a dispatch box and had somehow never stopped being invited to dinner. It meant Meg, formerly of Harrington Hall, presently of Ashworth Park, promoted twice in a year and still apologizing to furniture. And it meant, at the Duchess's right hand, in the place of honor she pretended not to notice was the place of honor, an old woman with 40 years of service in her back and a lace cap that had cost more than she would ever admit. Mrs. Pott had wept for one entire day when Clara asked her to come to Ashworth. She had then packed in 40 minutes. Her geraniums had made the journey in a cart of their own. All of them, especially the third pot from the left, split rim and all, which now stood in pride of place on the south terrace and was pointed out to every single guest, whether they asked or not. There was one rule at the Duchess of Ashworth's table, and every servant in the house knew it, and it was never written down, because the rules that matter never are. No plate is taken until its owner is finished, no matter how slowly they eat, especially if they eat slowly. Diana came down from London for Michaelmas. She arrived in a whirl of parcels and gossip and a bottle green traveling coat of extraordinary smartness, kissed Clara on both cheeks, kissed Mrs. Pott, who turned scarlet with pleasure and said, "Miss Diana, really," and announced that London was exhausting, that everyone in it was a fool, and that she had refused 2 proposals since Easter. "2," said Clara, walking her through the gallery. "The first was after my money," Diana said serenely, "which I found insulting and told him so, and also that the sum was in trust and he couldn't touch a shilling of it. You should have seen his face. It was the best evening of the season. The second was after my face, which was at least honest, but he laughed at nothing I said, and I have decided." She stopped at the tall window, looking out over the park, and for a moment the drawing-room brightness fell away and she was simply Diana, 20 years old, learning a life without a script. "I have decided I shall marry a man who laughs at what I actually say, or no one at all. I'm in no hurry. I was in a hurry my whole childhood. I've given it up." Her dowry had been settled the previous autumn from Clara's estate, drawn up by Clara's own lawyers, generous enough to raise every eyebrow in the county. Diana had received the papers, read every line twice, and sent back a 1-sentence letter that Clara kept in her writing desk and intended to keep forever. "It is in writing, and so am I. Thank you, sister." Of the Dowager Lady Harrington, the county spoke rarely, and always in the past tense, though she was not dead. The King's Bench had been patient and thorough, which is to say merciless. The estate was stripped back to its rightful line. Dr. Kell lost his license and left for the continent, and the great lady herself escaped prison only by the surrender of everything she had which, as the whole county now knew, had never been hers at all. Harrington Hall was closed. Clara could have pressed further. Her lawyers had urged it. Instead, she had done the one thing her grandmother could never have done, and never understood. She had signed over a small annuity enough for a cottage, a maid, coal in winter, and not 1 shilling more, and closed the ledger. "Charity," Clara had said, handing the deed to the lawyers, "begins at home." The old woman lived now in a small stone house on the edge of a distant village, where she was known as a proud, silent person who dressed beautifully, corresponded with no one, and was invited nowhere. She kept her accounts. The maid reported in a green ledger every farthing entered in a fine strong hand, a lifetime of habit with nothing left to count. She never wrote to her granddaughters. She was, at the last, exactly what she had always been, perfectly balanced and perfectly alone. The Michaelmas dinner wound down the way the best dinners do, slowly, with the candles low and the laughter easy and nobody in any hurry to rise. Lady Marrow had won the argument about roses. Mrs. Pott had been persuaded, after 2 glasses of Madeira, to tell the story of the geranium pot again, and had told it magnificently, with new details that had certainly not happened. And at the head of the table the Duke of Ashworth watched his wife laugh, the Duchess, in sea-green silk, hair coming loose the way it did by the end of a good evening, and thought, as he thought most evenings, that his father had been right about nearly everything, but most of all about this. When the last course was cleared, every plate finished, every plate waited for, the Duke quietly signaled the footman away from the sideboard, rose, and did a strange thing. He slid his own plate, empty and shining, down the linen to stop in front of his wife. The table went quiet. Clara looked down at it, white china on white linen, and then up at him, one eyebrow rising, and 13 guests watched the Duchess of Ashworth try not to smile and fail completely. "You are a year too late, Your Grace," she said. "I've eaten." "Look again." She looked again. In the center of the plate, small and gleaming, lay her mother's locket, the worn gold oval, the old chain, absent from her neck since the courtroom, held these 12 months by lawyers and trustees and clerks as exhibit the first asterisk, and released at last. The letter had said to its owner, all matters being now concluded. But the chain was new. Fine new gold, strong links made to last another lifetime. And when Clara picked it up with unsteady fingers and pressed her thumb to the back plate, the way only 3 living people knew how, the plate slid a quarter turn, and inside, where a key had once lain hidden in wax for 7 years, there was now a scrap of paper, folded very small. She unfolded it, her husband's black decided hand, 4 words. "For the next heir." Clara's head came up. The Duke was watching her with those steady gray eyes, and what was in them made her breath catch. The question, the certainty, the asterisk joy of a man who has done his arithmetic, and her hand went, without her quite deciding it, to rest below her heart, where for 3 weeks now she had been carrying the beginning of a secret she had told no one at all. "You knew," she whispered. "How could you possibly?" "Madam." The Duke of Ashworth reached across the corner of the table and took his wife's hand, to the growing delight of 13 guests and the open tears of one housekeeper. "You have eaten your breakfast at 7:30 every day of our marriage. This week you rang for it at *6*. I noticed things about your plate." His voice, which had held level in a courtroom before 91 witnesses, finally broke. "I have always noticed things about your plate." The table erupted. Lady Marrow struck the wood with her palm like a magistrate. Mrs. Pott abandoned all dignity into her handkerchief. Somewhere in the happy roar, Diana's voice rang out, "I had better be godmother, and I want it in writing." And the candles blazed, and the old house held its warm light out against the September dark. Clara laughed and wept and held the little locket to her heart. Her mother's locket, her father's cleverness, her daughter's inheritance, if it was a daughter. The smallest room in England that had held, at one time or another, everything that mattered. A key, a fortune, a promise, and now a future. "It was always yours," said the Duke, closing her fingers around it. "Everything always was." Outside, the last light faded over the park. Inside, no one hurried, and no one was hungry, and no plate, not one, was taken away before its owner was finished. They never were again. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.